The hit on anti-gang unit boss Charl Kinnear has raised questions about the safety of officers. My next guest concluded the first comprehensive analysis of the main law designed to deal with gang-related crimes. He specifically looked at Chapter 4 of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act to investigate the shortcomings of that particular legislation. He joins us now. He's with the Northwest University. He's a law lecturer there, Dr. Delano Cole from Linde. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time on News at Prime. There are huge concerns about what the killing of Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear says about organized crime syndicates in this country and the extent to which they simply have no regard for the rule of law, that they're even willing to target one individual who is at the top of the investigations to get that message across.
Yes, good evening, Cathy. That is correct. Since the past, I believe, 5 years, there's been an increase year on year on gang-related activities, especially in the Western Cape. And it is comparative to other countries that have high gang problems like Los Angeles. We have much higher gang-related killings, attempted murders, and also the children being impacted by it negatively. The gangs are truly operating with true violence.
Is the fact that government seemingly is unable to get a handle on this a reflection of weaknesses in the legislation or weaknesses in policing itself?
Yes, this is a multifaceted problem, and one of the issues is, of course, policing. There not being enough policing, and especially the affected areas in our poorer communities. We've seen in 2018, I believe, the Western Cape High Court saying that the formula used to allocate police resources unfairly prejudiced poor and black communities in the allocation of police resources. So where there are higher rates of crime, especially gang crime, there is much less police officers to start off with. The criminal justice system, after there have been arrests, is also not operating properly. The Prevention of Organized Crime Act that was enacted to deal with criminal gang activities hasn't brought about any significant change in the amount of gang convictions. So, and of course, there's also a social issue. Why are people committing gang-related crimes in the first place? It's a poverty issue at the heart of it. So the failure and the issues are deep-rooted in those three spheres especially.
Of course, one of the questions that is being asked in this particular case, and Minister Bekele asked the question too, around the personal security of Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear, that he had security deployed outside his home. At some point there was even a police Nyala station there, and there was a discovery of 2 men who were holding hand grenades during that period. But then that security was withdrawn. The minister doesn't have the answer to why that happened. Is that, again, the effect of the legislation, or just poor decision-making by the provincial and the local authorities?
Yes, I can't particularly speak to that, but I believe that there was enough of a significant threat to maintain the police presence there. So at that time, the organized crime legislation wouldn't have kicked in for him to get any type of protection, at least not in terms of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. But I think maybe that it might have been not appropriate to withdraw it at that time.
When we take a look at the research that you have found, is this piece of legislation sufficient enough to help deal with organized crime in this country? So is it getting to the masterminds and not just dealing with the middlemen or the runners on the street?
In my opinion, at the moment, no, it's not doing that at all. Nothing that the common law didn't do in any case. We do need some stronger legislative means to address it better, because at this moment it's mostly impacting the lower level operatives. So yeah, but I must also add that it's difficult to gather evidence in gang-related trials, people willing to testify. So that's also a significant issue that might be at times insurmountable. But at this time, I think we really do need a legislative intervention to amend POCA in some form to better help convictions. Like I said earlier, it's also a policing problem, it's also a social issue, but at the criminal justice level, at the prosecution level, things aren't working properly.
What are the specific issues that potential amendments would need to deal with or speak to?
Specifically holding higher level officials responsible, just the amount of evidence required and the evidentiary hurdles required to successfully prosecute. So, like I said, that is an issue that people do not want to testify, but also the act in itself makes it quite difficult to the type of evidence that is required and the amount of evidence that is required. It can be streamlined a bit. At this moment, you would require 2 previous convictions before the Prevention of Organized Crime Act kicks in. So that would form a pattern of criminal gang activity, and only then can the provisions of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act kick in. So as you can hear from that, and that's a bit of an oversimplified explanation, but that is the crux of it. It takes quite a while to form a successful gang case and to execute the prosecution properly.
Does that explain why there are such low conviction rates?
Yes, definitely. The other thing is also we do have the Prevention of Organized Crime Act and the common law are substantially similar, and that's one of my problems I have with the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, that it didn't really add anything new to our existing body of law. So we would have to look at nuanced and stronger mechanisms. We can't just, incorporate new mechanisms, but in a new piece of legislation expect different results if it's substantially similar to what we've had under the common law. So that would in part explain the low conviction rates, and also prosecutors are just relying on the common law to prosecute people. So instead of relying on POCA because it might require too much evidence or the prosecution might be hampered, they would just prosecute someone for a drug-related offense, which might not have a very long sentence.
All right, that was Dr. Delano Cole van der Linde, a lecturer in the Faculty of Law at the University of the Northwest.